the day I walked out of the Oregon State Correctional Institution. The November rain was coming down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to wash me clean. I stood at the gate with a paper bag containing a phone that no longer held a charge, a wallet with $43 in it, and a watch my father had given me the day I turned 30. 9 years. 9 years I had been inside those walls for a crime I did not commit, and the world outside had kept spinning without me, as if I had never existed at all. My name is Frank Callahan. I am 64 years old. I built Callahan Freight Solutions from a single truck and a rented warehouse in Portland into a $42 million logistics company that moved goods across 11 western states. I had 400 employees who called me by my first name. I had a daughter named Lauren, who was my whole reason for getting up every morning. I had a wife named Carol, who I thought loved me. And I had a business partner named Dennis, who I trusted more than any man alive. Every single one of those things turned out to be something other than what I believed. The tax fraud charges came in the spring of 2015. The IRS showed up at my office with federal agents and a stack of documents that made my stomach drop. Shell companies I had never heard of. Offshore accounts in my name. Invoices for services that were never rendered. Payments to vendors that did not exist. My accountant, a man I had employed for 11 years, stood in my conference room and told investigators that I had personally instructed him to falsify the records. He said it with a straight face, while I sat across the table, not believing what I was hearing. My lawyer called it one of the most thorough financial fraud setups he had ever encountered in 30 years of criminal defense. The jury saw a rich man who had gotten greedy, and they gave me 12 years. I served 9 with good behavior. Carol came to the visitation center twice in the first year. She cried both times and told me she was fighting for me, that she knew I was innocent, that she would wait. The divorce papers arrived 14 months into my sentence. She wrote short letters saying she could not put her life on hold. She had found someone who could be present in ways that I could not. I later learned that someone was Dennis. That was not a surprise. By then, very little surprised me anymore. What broke me was Lauren. My daughter had been 27 when I went to prison. She was working as a marketing manager for a tech startup in Portland, making a good living. Happy, engaged to a man named Tom who I genuinely liked. She had a future she had built for herself. When the charges came, the company Dennis now ran alone terminated a consulting contract with Lauren's firm, citing conflict of interest. Her firm let her go. Tom's family pressured him to distance himself from the daughter of a convicted felon. The engagement ended. She spent 3 years trying to rebuild, then moved to Tacoma to start over somewhere nobody knew her last name. I did not find out any of this from Lauren. She wrote to me faithfully for the first 2 years, cheerful letters that I now realize were carefully constructed to protect me from the full weight of what was happening to her. Then the letters changed. Shorter, less detail. Then they stopped entirely. I called. She answered sometimes. She always said she was fine. She was not fine, and I was powerless behind those walls to do anything about it. Lauren had a son, my grandson Marcus, born 3 years after I went inches. His father left when Marcus was 18 months old. Lauren was raising him alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tacoma, working as an office manager for a dental practice. She drove a car with 200,000 miles on it. She clipped coupons. My daughter, who had grown up in a 4,000 square foot house in Lake Oswego, was clipping coupons to feed my grandson. Dennis Hartley was living in that house in Lake Oswego. He had married Carol. He was running the company I had built, billing himself as the founder in interviews, sitting in my chair at the head of the conference table I had bought, parking in the space with my name on it that he had simply replaced with his own. I found all of this out through a private investigator named Ray Decker. I hired Ray with the last of the money I had put aside in a small savings account that Dennis had somehow missed when he was dismantling my life. Ray was 61, a former Portland detective who had left the force after a disagreement with the department over how a case had been handled. A disagreement that turned out to be a moral objection to watching the wrong man get convicted. When I called him from a prison payphone and explained my situation, he was quiet for a long moment before he said, "I know your case. I always thought something was off about it. That was enough for me." What Ray found over the following months turned everything I thought I knew into a new and uglier picture. Dennis had been skimming from the company for 4 years before the charges came. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as he grew confident. When the internal discrepancy reached a level that my controller was about to flag, Dennis made a decision. He and Carol, who had been involved for at least 2 years before I was arrested, brought in a man named Steve Molina, a forensic accountant with a history of doing clean work for dirty clients. Steve restructured the paper trail. He did not just hide Dennis's theft. He redirected it. Every fraudulent transaction was reattributed to me. Accounts were opened in my name, using documents Carol had access to. Invoices were backdated. My signature appeared on authorization forms I had never seen. The IRS investigation that followed had no reason to look anywhere else. The evidence was immaculate, and it all pointed directly at me. Ray laid it all out for me at a diner near the bus station during my first week out. He slid a folder across the table and let me read while my coffee went cold. I asked him about Steve Molina. Ray said Steve was in a difficult position. He had done what Dennis paid him to do, and he had been compensated well, but the compensation had dried up. Dennis had cut him off once the conviction came through. Steve had moved to Boise, was working small accounting jobs, and was carrying the kind of guilt that tends to express itself as chronic insomnia and too much whiskey on weeknights. Ray had spoken to him informally, just a conversation, and Steve had not denied anything. He had simply stared out the window and said he supposed something like this would catch up to him eventually. "Desperate men make the worst decisions," I said. Ray nodded. "But they make the best witnesses. I spent 3 weeks watching before I made any move. I did not contact Dennis. I did not drive past the house. I did not let any former employee or business associate know I was back. I was not invisible exactly, but I had learned in 9 years that patience is a sharper instrument than anger, and I intended to use it carefully. I went to see Lauren first. She opened the door of her apartment on a Tuesday evening and looked at me for a full 5 seconds before she said anything. She had her mother's eyes, but my stubbornness in the set of her jaw, and I could see the 9 years mapped onto her face in ways that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with carrying weight for too long alone. "Dad," she said, and then her voice gave out entirely. We sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours. Marcus was doing homework in the next room, and every few minutes I could hear him shifting in his chair or humming something quietly to himself. She told me everything she had held back from the letters, the lost job, The broken engagement. The years of starting over. The difficulty of explaining to a small boy why his mother cried sometimes when she thought he was asleep. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Because you were in there and I was out here. And there was nothing either of us could do about any of it. What would knowing have helped? I did not have an answer for that. What I had instead was purpose. And I told her so. I told her I had not spent 9 years doing nothing. I told her I had built something in that prison that had no square footage and no company registration, but was nonetheless real. A case. A plan. A framework for taking back what had been stolen. She looked at me the way Lauren has always looked at me, when she thinks I am underestimating the problem. "Dad," she said, "Dennis has money and lawyers, and 9 more years of entrenching himself. We have a rented apartment and a car that needs a new alternator. We have the truth," I said. "And we have something he does not know about." She raised an eyebrow. "What, me?" "He thinks I'm a broken old man coming home to nothing. He thinks the best I can do is be angry. He does not know what I have been preparing." She was quiet for a moment. Then she called into the next room. "Marcus, come out here. There is someone I want you to meet." My grandson walked into the kitchen with a pencil behind his ear and a math worksheet in his hand. He was 6 years old, small for his age, with Lauren's eyes and what I would later recognize as my own way of holding very still when he was thinking something through. He looked at me with the frank assessment that small children apply to strangers before trust is established. "This is your grandfather," Lauren said. He studied me. "You were in prison," he said. It was not an accusation, just a fact he was locating in the right file. "I was," I said. "I didn't do what they said I did." He thought about that. "Like wrongful conviction," he said. "We learned about that." "Exactly like that." He nodded, satisfied, and climbed into the chair beside me, as if we had known each other for years. "Show me what you're working on," I said, and pointed at the worksheet. He spread it out on the table between us. That was the moment I understood what I was fighting for. Finding Steve Molina took a week. Ray had his address in Boise and a rough schedule of his movements. I drove down on a Thursday, alone, and found him at a coffee shop he used as a makeshift office on weekday mornings. He was smaller than I expected. Mid-50s, thinning hair, the careful stillness of a man who spends a lot of time trying not to look like what he is. I sat down across from him without asking permission. He looked up from his laptop. His face went through several changes in rapid succession. Recognition, fear, something close to relief, which surprised me. "Mr. Callahan," he said. "That's right. How did you find me? Does it matter?" He closed the laptop. His hands were not steady. "I figured you would find me eventually," he said. "After you got out, I have been thinking about what I would say." I leaned forward. "Then, say it." What Steve told me over the next 90 minutes filled in every gap Ray had left open. Dennis had approached him in late 2014 through a mutual contact in the commercial real estate world. The offer was simple. Restructure the records. Make the trail lead to me. Get paid and stay quiet. Steve had told himself at the time that I was probably guilty of something anyway. That rich businessmen always had dirty corners. That he was just doing a technical job. He had believed that for about 6 months. Then I went to prison and Lauren lost her job, and he saw an article about my daughter, and he had not slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since. I need to know if you will sign a statement. I said. A full accounting of what was done. How it was done. What Dennis told you. And what you were paid. If I do that, he said, Dennis will come after me. Dennis is going to be in no position to come after anyone. He was quiet. What do I get? I looked at him steadily. You get to stop carrying this. You get to look at yourself in the mirror. Beyond that, I will speak with the federal prosecutor about your cooperation. And that conversation will include the fact that you came forward voluntarily and provided complete information. I cannot promise what they will do. I can promise that staying silent will be worse for you than talking, because I am going to bring this entire thing down with or without you, and I would rather you be on the right side of it when it lands. He stared out the window at the street for a long time. Then he said, I have it all. I kept everything. I told myself it was insurance. The original documents, the account structures, my communications with Dennis, all of it. I did not let my expression change. Good, I said. Bring it to me. I drove back to Portland with a folder in my passenger seat that was worth more than anything I owned. Ray and I spent 2 weeks organizing what we had. Steve's documents, the evidence Ray had assembled on the financial movements, a second forensic accountant who reviewed everything and provided a signed opinion that the original records had been deliberately altered, a digital forensic specialist who recovered email threads between Dennis and Steve from an account Dennis had believed was closed and wiped. The threads were detailed. They were damning. They contained his exact words. When I was ready, I called Dennis. He picked up on the third ring. His voice had the smooth, settled quality of a man who had been comfortable for a long time and expected to remain so. He said my name with the careful warmth of someone managing a situation rather than greeting a person. Frank, I heard you were out. How are you doing? I am doing very well. I said. I would like to come by the house and talk. There are some things we need to discuss. A pause. The house in Lake Oswego. You mean? That is the one. Sunday morning. 9. Another pause. Longer. Frank, I do not think that is a great idea. Tell Carol I am coming. I will see you Sunday. I did not wait for his answer. I hung up. Sunday morning, I drove to Lake Oswego in a car Ray had lent me, wearing clothes that were decent but not impressive. I had thought carefully about this. I did not want to look like a man who had arrived with resources. I wanted Dennis to see what he believed he had created. Someone diminished. Someone manageable. The door to my house opened before I reached the steps. Carol stood in the doorway. 15 years of marriage and 9 years of absence had produced a version of her I recognized structurally, but not essentially. She was wearing Dennis's expression, that practiced composure of people who have told a lie for so long they have stopped distinguishing it from truth. Walter, she said. She caught herself. Frank. Hello. Carol. The living room had been redecorated twice. The furniture I had chosen was gone. The photographs of our family were gone. There were neutral prints on the walls, the kind that cost money but say nothing. Dennis was standing near the fireplace with the posture of a man in his own territory. He was heavier than I remembered, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car, and he looked at me with an expression that was trying to be friendly and landing closer to guarded. "Frank," he said, extending his hand. "It is good to see you." I did not take the hand. I sat down in the chair nearest the door and waited. His arm dropped. He sat across from me. Carol remained standing near the hall, as if she had not decided yet whether to stay or go. "I understand you have had a difficult time," Dennis said. "And I want you to know, whatever hard feelings you might have toward me, I do not have hard feelings," I said. "I have evidence." The room went quiet in a particular way, that rooms only go quiet when everyone in them has suddenly stopped pretending. "I have Steve Molina's signed statement. I have the original documents he used to restructure the records. I have your emails to him, Dennis, the ones you thought were deleted, the ones where you lay out the entire plan in writing, because you were arrogant enough to believe you would never have to explain yourself. I have a forensic accountant's opinion and a digital recovery specialist's report and enough documentation to interest a federal prosecutor considerably." Dennis's face was doing something complicated. Carol had gone entirely still. "You set me up," I said. "Not because I did anything wrong. Because you had been stealing and you needed somewhere to put it. And because you wanted the company and my wife and my house. And I was the most convenient solution to all of those problems at once. You destroyed my daughter's life. And you cost my grandson a grandfather for the first 6 years of his life. And you did it without losing a single night of sleep in this house that you did not build and do not deserve." Dennis found his voice. "Whatever you think you have." I played the recording. It was Steve's voice, clear and level, recorded in the Boise coffee shop with a device Ray had helped me set up beforehand. Steve's accounting of every step. The shell companies, the offshore structures, the signature forgeries, Dennis's instructions, repeated back in specific language, the payment amounts, the dates, the agreement to stay silent. I let it run for 4 minutes. Then I turned it off. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator running in the kitchen. Dennis looked at Carol. She looked back at him with an expression I had not seen on her face before and could not fully read. Whatever had held them together in this house all these years, it was not love. I could see that clearly now. It was complicity. Two people bound by a shared choice that could not be undone. They were looking at each other the way people look at each other when the thing they built together is coming apart. "What do you want?" Dennis said finally. "I want the company. I want this house. I want every asset that was acquired using resources taken from me during my incarceration. I want you to provide full written confession and cooperate with the federal investigation that is going to follow this regardless of what you decide in the next few minutes. I want Carol to sign a statement acknowledging her prior knowledge of the fraud and renouncing any claim to marital assets. And I want both of you to understand that my daughter and my grandson are going to be made whole financially and in every other way I can arrange." "That is insane," Dennis said. His voice had lost its polish entirely. It sounded like what it was. A man who had just watched his exits disappear. "You cannot prove I can prove everything," I said. "I have been inside a prison cell for 9 years. Dennis, I did not spend that time grieving. I spent it planning. You had every advantage. And all I had was time. I used it more carefully than you used your advantages." Carol spoke for the first time. Her voice was flat and stripped of everything I used to associate with her. What happens to me? I looked at her for a moment. I felt something, but it was not the thing I had expected to feel. It was something quieter, a kind of finished sadness, the way you feel when you have finally put down a weight and realize how long you were carrying it. You cooperate with prosecutors, I said. You sign the statements my lawyers will put in front of you. You tell the truth and you do it completely. In exchange, I will not advocate for your prosecution. I will let the district attorney make their own determination. But if you withhold anything, if you complicate this in any way, I will make sure every detail of what you knew, and when you knew it is on the public record. She nodded once. She did not look at Dennis again. The negotiation took 11 days. Dennis's lawyers made the expected threats. They cited statutes of limitations, questioned the admissibility of Steve's statement, floated the possibility of a countersuit for defamation that everyone in the room knew was a bluff. I sat through all of it with my own attorney beside me, and I did not raise my voice once. I had said everything I needed to say on Sunday morning in my living room. The rest was paperwork. Dennis pleaded guilty to federal tax fraud, conspiracy, and financial forgery. He received a sentence of 10 years, with the possibility of parole after 7. His attorneys managed to position it as cooperation in exchange for leniency, which was technically accurate and utterly irrelevant to the reality of what he had done. Carol signed her statements. She avoided criminal charges in exchange for complete cooperation with prosecutors. She moved to her sister's house in Phoenix, and we have not spoken since. Steve Molina received a reduced sentence of 18 months, suspended with 3 years of probation, and a permanent prohibition from working in financial services. He gave his complete cooperation. When it was over, he sent me a handwritten letter that I did not read for 2 weeks. When I finally did, it was 4 paragraphs long and ended with, "I know this does not fix what I helped take from you. I am sorry. It is not enough, but it is everything I have to give." I put the letter in a drawer and left it there. The company was in worse shape than it looked from the outside. Dennis's management style had prioritized the appearance of profitability over actual operational health. Client relationships had eroded. Key logistics contracts had not been renewed. 2 of the distribution centers were running at well below capacity. The board, which had been stacked with Dennis's people, reconstituted itself rapidly once it became clear which direction things were going. And there were 4 genuine members who had been there when I ran the company, and who had privately never been comfortable with the narrative of my guilt. The rebuilding took longer than the justice. Lauren came back to Portland. She did not come back to work in the company immediately. That was her choice, and I respected it. But she came back to the city, found an apartment she liked, enrolled Marcus in a school with a good art program because he had turned out to have his grandmother's eye for color and proportion, which I chose to see as one of the universe's more pointed jokes. Marcus and I established a routine. Saturday mornings at a diner 2 blocks from his school, where he told me about his week, and I told him stories about his mother growing up and about his great-grandfather, who had built a business from nothing in a different era, and left it to people who turned out to have different definitions of the word deserve. Marcus listened to those stories with the same still attention he had given his math worksheet the first night we met. He was building something in that small head of his, some understanding of the world and where he fit in it, and I felt the profound responsibility of being part of that construction. One evening, About 8 months after I had moved back into the house, I was sitting on the back porch, watching the October light do what Oregon light does in the fall, turning everything it touches the color of old gold. Inside, Marcus was helping Lauren set the table. For dinner, I could hear them arguing cheerfully about whether forks go on the left or the right, and Lauren laughing when Marcus declared that forks should go wherever makes the most sense geometrically. I thought about Steve Molina's letter in the drawer. I thought about Carol somewhere in Phoenix carrying whatever it is you carry when you have made the choices she made. I thought about Dennis in a federal facility, sitting with the particular boredom of a man who believed his intelligence would protect him from consequences and found out too late that it would not. I thought about a question Lauren had asked me 2 weeks after Dennis signed his plea agreement. She had asked whether I had ever considered that the hatred might have done more damage to me than the 9 years. I had not answered her immediately. I had thought about it for 3 days before I told her what I had concluded, which was this. What I had felt was not hatred. Hatred is formless and corrosive. What I had felt was precision. A decision to be more careful than my enemy. Commitment to work longer and wait longer and document everything and speak quietly and keep my face still until the moment was right. That is not hatred. That is what it looks like when a man refuses to let the worst thing that happened to him become the only thing that defines him. She had looked at me for a moment and then said, "Dad, you are going to need to work on being a little less intense when Marcus's teachers call." I told her I would try. The question of compensation for wrongful imprisonment is one I want to be direct about because it is real, and it matters, and most people do not know how it works or how inadequate it is. The Federal Innocence Protection Act provides a baseline of compensation for those exonerated of federal crimes, currently approximately $50,000 per year of wrongful imprisonment. For 9 years, that amounts to $450,000, which sounds like a significant number until you consider the lifetime earnings I lost, the company value that was stripped from me, the damage to my daughter's career and life trajectory, and the fact that no number of dollars returns a single day of my grandson's first 6 years. State-level compensation varies enormously and is subject to caps and exclusions that often bear no relationship to the actual harm inflicted. My civil case against Dennis and against Steve is ongoing. My attorneys believe we will recover substantially. The point is not the money, though the money matters. The point is the legal acknowledgement that what was done to me was done, that it was wrong, and that the people who did it are accountable. That acknowledgement took 9 years and 20 months of work after I got out, and I want anyone watching this to understand both that it is possible and that it is not fast, and that the slowness of it is its own kind of punishment that nobody talks about enough. There are things I cannot recover. The years Lauren spent building herself back up alone. The evenings Marcus went to sleep without a grandfather to call. The ordinary, unremarkable days that accumulate into a life, and that were simply taken from me and discarded. No court and no settlement will address any of that. That is a grief that belongs only to me and to my daughter, and to a 6-year-old boy who once told me, very seriously, that he thought it was unfair that we had missed each other for so long. I told him it was unfair. I told him it was also over. I told him that from here on out every Saturday at the diner was ours, and every dinner Lauren made where forks went on the wrong side geometrically was ours, and every ordinary, unremarkable day was ours, and we were going to use them. He considered this and then said, "Okay, But I still think forks go on the left. He is right. Actually, they do. If you are watching this, and you are carrying something like what I carried, a wrong that was done to you by someone who counted on your trust to make their betrayal easier, I want you to hear this directly. The people who hurt you believed they had calculated the full cost of what they were doing. They had not. They had not calculated patience. They had not calculated the specific quality of purpose that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. They had not calculated what a man will do when he decides that his story is not finished yet. He was wrong about the old part. 2. My name is Frank Callahan. I owned a $42 million company and a house in Lake Oswego and a life I had built from scratch. And a man I called my partner took all of it while I was not looking. I spent 9 years in a cell. That was not meant for an innocent man. I came out with $43 and a dead phone and one complete and fully documented plan. I got my house back. I got my company back. I got my name back. More than any of that, I got every Saturday morning at a diner with a boy who has my stubbornness and his grandmother's eye for color, and an opinion about fork placement that I would not argue with for anything in the world. The people who tried to erase me are gone. I am still here. Keep fighting. Document everything. Be more patient than your enemy, and believe that the truth surfaces eventually, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. I am living proof.